Hello, I'm Dylan.
And I'm Keon.
This is Trust Your Doctor, that podcast with a giant invisible chicken, because this week we watched Vincent and the Doctor.
Written by Richard Curtis.
Directed by Johnny Campbell.
And aired on June 5th, 2010.
Coming rapidly to a close here this season.
Every episode I'm struggling to say 2010 instead of 2010.
I mean, you can say 2010. I think people will know what you mean.
No, I don't want to, though.
But why?
Because in 2010, I said 2010. And now, I don't want to go back and change it to 2010.
Why not?
I just don't. I don't know. There's just something perverse about that.
I don't think there's anything perverse about that.
I started saying 20 in 2013, I think. Maybe it was
Great,
2012.
so we got to go through another 2 damn seasons of this.
Yeah.
At least. Fantastic. Anyway, let's talk production, because it's actually vaguely interesting this week. At least I thought so when I looked it up.
Well, it's more the writing of it that was interesting, which is strange. Well, not really, actually, but sometimes it's the filming that's interesting this time.
Well, so Richard Curtis is a apparently well-known British writer who's done a lot of stuff, but the only thing that I recognized of his was Blackadder, which I've watched a couple episodes on. Really good. Got to go back and finish that one day.
Yeah,
actually.
I was looking at, the sort of the stuff that he created and contributed to, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily know what all of them were.
Mm-hmm.
I knew a couple. Blackadder was one of them, a couple other ones too. Most of them are probably pretty famous. But he was involved in The Curse of Fatal Death.
Right, because I found out he was one of the people who founded, or at least got Comic Relief started.
Right.
So he was kind of one of the head guys on that. And then, back in, when was Curse of Fatal Death? 98?
98 or whatever.
He asked Sue Vertrue, he's like, hey, can your husband write something for Doctor Who for Comic Relief? And she was like, yeah. So remember, Stephen Moffat's married to Sue Vertrue, who's one of the producers, I think, on the show right in the era that we're watching right now. Or one of the executive producers or something like that. She was a well-known TV exec. So Richard Curtis asked her to ask Stephen to do some things, and he's like, yeah. And then
nepotism.
Well, I was going to say, I feel like TV production is kind of always built on nepotism.
Yeah, it is.
So Stephen, Curse of Fatal Death, and then when Stephen took over the show, he, I guess, asked Richard Curtis, hey, can you write something for the show? And he was like, I got to think about it, because apparently Richard Curtis wasn't a fan of Doctor Who just at all, just wasn't a fan. And so he had to take a little while to come to a consensus of this decision.
I mean, that doesn't mean he hated it. You're I guess you're not, but it kind of sounds like you're making it out as if not being a fan
Richard
means you
Curtis
hate
just hated Doctor Who. No.
Well, I mean,
he was just not a fan.
When I found out that he wasn't really a big fan of Doctor Who, and he'd always had this story in mind with Van Gogh, where he wanted to explore Van Gogh's
Van Gogh.
Oh God, yeah, I should just pronounce it like that because that's what they say it in the episode. That he always wanted to write this story where he explored Van Gogh's mental illnesses and stuff like that. Yeah. I was like, all right, why this episode wasn't that great to me is all coming together, because it was sort of this other thing that was put into Doctor Who, which a lot of episodes were, even if you look at the classic show, but hey.
I thought it was good for that reason. Pretty sure I've said on this show before that my favorite episodes of Doctor Who are the least Doctor Who-like, i.e. Midnight, this, City of Death, so... Anyway,
yeah,
he wrote the story, and apparently the first couple drafts were somewhat of a departure from the final draft. In one of the drafts, there are 2 Crephaeuses, and the second one commits suicide after the first one accidentally gets killed by Van Gogh, and I think somebody in the production department went, that's a little dark, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, they don't really even go into the suicide because Van Gogh committed suicide, which they mention, but they don't really I mean, yeah, actually, you know what they do? Sort of touch on it.
They mention it twice, and they talk about Van Gogh's, I guess, bipolar disorder. In one of the drafts, now I completely forgot what I was going to say, but the final copy of this overran by quite a bit. Even though they gave it an additional 5 minutes in its time slot, it still overran by something like 5 to 10 minutes, so they had to cut a bunch of stuff. Apparently they cut a bunch of stuff with
the origin of the Crephaeus, basically.
Yeah, the origin of the Crephaeus, and also...
Is it Crephaeus or Crephaeus?
It's Crephaeus. And also the mother of the girl who dies, Roseanne. Roseanne's the girl who dies. Her mother, they cut a bunch of scenes with her. Apparently they had more scenes with her, I guess, parading Van Gogh. And that's about it. Filming wasn't actually that interesting, although there was one interesting thing, which is that... Who directed this again? Johnny Campbell, decided 3 months before they actually went to Croatia, because if you remember in our Vampires of Venice episode, we were like, oh yeah, they filmed this in Croatia so they could do it at the same time as Vincent and the Doctor. Before they went to Croatia, 3 months before they went, he filmed these establishing shots of like the cornfields in, I guess, England, because by the time they get to Croatia, it would be basically fall and the corn or the wheat wouldn't be in season anymore, so you wouldn't be able to...
corn is in like grain.
Well, yeah. The grains. You filmed some grains of some indeterminate nature, and it wouldn't be in season, I guess, when they actually went to film the episode. Yeah. So 3 months before they even started filming, he filmed those shots.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I'm saying is, like, you can call wheat corn.
Yeah.
Because, like, corn, I mean, we think of corn now, we think of, like...
sweet corn. Yeah. Basically.
But, hundreds of years ago, corn just meant, like, any type of grain.
Gotta get my maize.
Yeah. There were, to go back to the scripts for a second, I read that Curtis's daughter contributed stuff to the script, like the Crephaeus being in the window in the painting and stuff like that.
Oh, that's actually what I wanted to mention about one of the other drafts about the Crephaeus. There was... which actually, they filmed this, but it got cut in the final, again, for running time, was the Doctor would have known the Crephaeus from apparently a Time Lord children's book. And the Doctor would have been really anxious and antsy the whole episode because he would know what it is, and it would be this monster that he read about when he was a kid that really scared him.
Well, that's okay, because they brought back that machine that, like, just gives you information that was used in the classic show. In, like, Castrovalva, I want to say, or something like that.
I don't remember, honestly.
I don't know. Actually, it was when they were looking up the vampires in...
State of Decay?
State of Decay, yep. I think, if I remember correctly. You remember that? They just go in the TARDIS and they're like, tell us a little bit about...
I barely remember that whole E-Space trilogy, frankly.
You don't remember? Welcome to the Sanctuary. Whatever the cliffhanger was.
Nope, not really. I remember Adric being a little twerp from his very first episode. He was trying to be part of, like, the maths gang. And the maths gang was like, no. And
then they die.
And they died, and Adric was, like, left without a family. So the Doctor's like, you can come with us. Romana's like, damn. No, I'm not having this. She leaves 2 weeks later. She says to help people, but...
It's probably just to get away from Adric.
She saw an opportunity and she took it.
She saw an opportunity in this blank white expanse with lions.
Anything is better than traveling with Adric, living with Adric. Anyway, they renamed this episode from the original. Richard Curtis apparently wanted to give it like some abstract name about...
It was like Eyes That See the Darkness or something like that. That's actually related to what I want to talk about and kind of why I didn't like this episode.
But Stephen Moffat was like, let's name it Vincent and the Doctor to parallel that mirror movie called Vincent and Theo, which is about Vincent and his brother Theo.
Never even heard of that movie.
Neither had I until I was reading the production information about this episode.
Maybe it also parallels Doctor Who and the Silurians.
No.
Because, Now Vincent is like framed as the first character in that title, so it's all about him. This episode is more about him, really. The
I'm gonna
Doctor.
go with that wasn't the intention somehow.
Maybe it does have something to do with what goes on in this episode. Which
Maybe,
starts in
but
the
I think
museum.
it's just Stephen Moffat choosing titles that reference like either old movies or old books.
Sure. Yeah,
like
sure.
Amy's Choice and Sophie's Choice.
Yeah,
Vincent and the Doctor, Vincent and Theo.
I still think 5 seasons in that New Who episode titles aren't usually great.
Like Hungry Earth and Cold Blood.
No. I mean, I can't remember, like, for Blake 7, I remember, like, almost every single episode's
Yeah,
title.
well, wait till we get to Series D.
Sand.
Somehow I think that's going to be really difficult to remember all the names.
But for Doctor Who, like, even, because most Blake 7 episodes are just one-word titles, but somehow I still remember them and they're distinct to me. But Doctor Who, I can't remember titles usually.
Oh, I seem to have the opposite. I have more difficulty remembering Blake 7 titles than Doctor Who titles. Just in general.
Yeah.
You didn't like the 11th Hour?
I liked the episode.
I mean, here's the thing about modern television is that just Doctor Who's the only, like, quote, modern, unquote, television show that I can remember episode titles for. Like, I watch all these other shows with my parents and my family. I just don't remember the names of any episodes. I just have to describe the episodes like we're watching Chuck. So it's like, yeah, that episode where Chuck, like, trains to be a spy, but they, like, fail him because he's too emotional? That one, which I have no idea what the name of that episode was.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of shows don't even put the title in the episode. It's just something that they just have a title that you'd only find if you looked it up.
A lot of shows stop putting the title of the episode in the like the opening credits. They just put the written by because that's a credit you have to put there to
indicate
as part of their
written by.
contract.
Yeah.
But they never put like the actual name. Typically you can get the name pretty easily if you go to Wikipedia.
Yeah, but like I think most people probably don't care about episode titles. Maybe Doctor Who's a little different because of the history of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And just how many stories there are. And, I don't know if this is true or not, but I feel like, and maybe this is just because Doctor Who's one of the only shows I actually do discuss online, is like I feel like Doctor Who online discussion is bigger than for most shows. The fan base is definitely, let's go with definitely bigger because of the history of the show.
Well, yeah, it might also be like a British thing, putting the episode, actually still putting the episode title in the episode.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so Sherlock still put the episode titles. Sherlock seems to be on indefinite hiatus. So, although on the flip side, ask me to name an episode of Broadchurch, and my description of the episode will be, it's that one where they like discover the thing and David Tennant's character.
Have to be a little better than that if you don't know the titles.
Well, so I don't want to spoil Broadchurch. Broadchurch is better watched unspoiled, with nothing spoiled, like absolutely nothing, which is just why I was being vague in that instance. Anyway, it begins in a museum. The Doctor's taken Amy to this museum, and she indicates that he's taken him to these 2 other places that she's wanted to go for a while, apparently.
Yeah, she's like, why are you being so nice to me? What's going on? The Doctor's like, oh, gee, I don't know. Maybe it has something to do with how your fiance just died. No. They actually don't mention Rory in this.
They do.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
When was that?
When they're outside the church, the Doctor goes, Amy, Rory, and then Amy goes, who's Rory? And the Doctor goes, wait, never mind.
Yeah, okay.
But the Doctor's like, yeah, I'm always nice to you. And she's like, but you're being more nice.
Yeah, I forgot that Amy's mind got wiped. Yeah,
so she doesn't remember Rory.
Yeah, all right, that makes a lot more sense.
And that's also what the scene where Vincent was like, why are you crying? And she's like, oh, I didn't even know I was crying. It's because he's like indicating that on some level she still kind of remembers Rory.
Yeah, well, at that point I was so not invested in the episode that I just kind of didn't care.
Well, you missed all the better parts of the episode. The second half was the better half. So the first half is like they spend all this time dicking around in this museum.
Not really. That was just the pre-opening sequence.
I guess.
They're in this museum, and there's this really passionate curator who's like really passionate about Van Gogh.
Yeah.
Like really passionate.
He's
like this guy studied art history, and like this is the only job he could take. So he's going all.
Maybe this is the only job he wanted.
Maybe.
It's played by Bill Nye, by the way. Played Davy Jones.
I'm just kidding.
Bill Nighy. No, I don't know how to actually say his last name, but Nighy.
Yeah.
In an uncredited cameo, by the way. But yeah, the doctor mentions his bow tie, and he's like, well, yours is pretty cool too. And he's like, yeah, bow ties are cool. And I'm like, well, that.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I don't know, maybe this has something to do with Curtis, founding, I guess, the comic relief event. But there's a lot of, like, failed humor in this, honestly.
I didn't think there was any humor in this. Except for that.
There are jokes.
That scene with the curator.
There are, like, lines and jokes and stuff. The dialogue in this felt as if the characters aren't actually even talking to each other. Especially with the doctor. He's just, like, on a completely... And I guess this has something to do with Rory getting killed. But he's just on a completely different page, I think. And he talks to himself a lot in this episode. Even when other people are talking to him, it just feels like he's talking to himself. And I didn't write down any quotes or anything, so you're just going to have to take my word for it.
Well, I'm not going to take your word for it because I don't have any idea what you're talking about at all. No idea what you're referencing. It's just
like, when the doctor goes into the TARDIS and he's looking up stuff about the Crephaeus and stuff and he's talking to himself, it's like as if that continues when he's back with other people.
I guess. I don't really see it, honestly.
When they're finally, right before the Crephaeus dies, they're running around and stuff and the doctor's just going on and on. He's just talking to himself. Like, the other characters are saying things, but the doctor is just having this one-man conversation. But hey, whatever.
I don't really see it, honestly. I'm just going to have to disagree with you there.
All right. I mean, we're going to disagree on most things about this episode because...
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
So the doctor sees a strange sort of figure in one of the paintings.
Yeah.
It's in a window and
of a church.
Yeah, and he and Amy say it looks human, but I think if I remember correctly, they're like, there's a. Maybe they don't. Maybe they just say something. I think they just say
humanoid.
I think they just say it's a face, and when they say that, I'm like, all right, human face, and I was like, I don't see that it's a human face, and it's not. It's like this weird chicken dinosaur.
Well, so they go. The doctor's like, well, we should go find out what that is. So he asks the curator when that painting was painted.
In like a really roundabout way. This was kind of funny, the way he does this.
And
totally
the curator
interrupts the tour.
The tour he's giving, but whatever. The curator says it was sometime between, I think, the 8th and 10th of June, 1890. I read that Richard Curtis kind of...
There were some liberties taken with...
fudged some of Vincent van Gogh's timeline.
Which is fine, like... Who cares?
Yeah, like apparently when when some of the paintings he painted in the story were painted, he wasn't actually living in that yellow house that he lives in the story. But since that yellow house is like Van Gogh's most famous residence, Richard Curtis, I guess, wanted to use that since it was one, like, recognizable and two well-known, so.
Yeah, good decision, I think,
Yeah, and I don't really mind too much about the liberties that were taken in fudging that a little bit. No. So
we didn't mention that this is the Musée d'Orsay or whatever.
Yeah.
Probably butchered that pronunciation, but hey, which is, I think, a famous museum in Paris.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I've heard of it before.
Pretty famous, B level, Delta grade, famous, Alpha grade,
and
famous.
The Louvre, which is also in Paris.
The Louvre. Well, the Louvre is famous because it's got the Mona Lisa in it. I mean, name
one museum that has the Mona Lisa in it. We just did.
Name anything else in the Louvre.
Yeah,
there's that massive... I heard about this, that there's this huge, like, floor-to-ceiling painting on the wall opposite the Mona Lisa, and all these people always look at the Mona Lisa, but there's this, like, apparently huge, awesome, massive painting on the wall directly opposite that no one ever looks at, and I was like, well, that kind of sucks.
Is the statue of David in the Louvre?
Good question. Let's find out. It's in Florence, in a gallery I'm not even going to try to pronounce.
All right.
The Galleria dell'Accademia, I think. Although, more Italian sounding. So, they go back. They go to the cafe that Van Gogh painted in that pretty famous painting of his, the one that has the cafe.
Yeah, I don't know the one you're talking about. I mean, I actually do know a couple of his paintings. Probably because they show them in the episode and they're like, yeah, hey, I recognize that.
It's the one that it looks like a cafe. I don't know how else to describe it. The cafe's like on the left. There's like a yellow awning and there's the seats underneath it and there's the road on the right. They apparently, the production team made up like a cafe in Croatia to look exactly like the one in the painting. They had to find one that looked vaguely similar, and they added, I think, the yellow awning and then the kind of balcony patio area.
Huh.
Van Gogh is getting thrown out because he can't pay. And they're like, we're not going to accept your painting as payment. And the doctor offers to pay, and he's like, no, I don't want any doctors. But then Amy's like, well, I'll pay, and I'll share the bottle of wine with whoever I choose.
Right. Well, the doctor offers to pay for the painting, which will help Van Gogh pay for the drinks.
The drink.
But he's like, no, don't waste your money on this garbage. It was very self-deprecating right off the bat.
Well, basically, no well-known painter was famous in their time except for Michelangelo, kind of. And there was another one that I'm not remembering right now.
I mean, I think there are a lot of, again, like B-list painters, like even today and, just in history who were famous in their time. Famous as in like among people who are interested in painting, right? Like I think a lot of the ones that people who know almost nothing about painting, like me, probably weren't famous in their time. But I don't think any of them were like as not famous as Van Gogh, right? He was famously like, never sold a painting. Like, yeah,
he sold one
famously,
painting.
unfamously, yeah.
He sold one painting to his like cousin, I think, or something.
Well, they mentioned in this episode it was his sister's friend or some relation like that.
And, well, Van Gogh is immediately smitten with Amy. She's like, how's it going? They talk. And they decide to go back to his house because the doctor wants to see when he paints the church because he wants to know what's going on. And
yeah, they kind of just follow him. He lets them come along because they don't have any place to stay. And he's like, all right, you guys can stay for one night. And then Amy whispers to the doctor, how long are we staying? And he's like, until we can find out what that thing was. So that was kind of funny, I guess.
They see the dead body of Roseanne. And she's like mauled and no one knows what did it because they didn't see anybody go down the alleyway after her. And then it's kind of a big mystery. And they get back to the house and I think they go to sleep actually. And I think the next day, well, the Crephaeus attacks them.
Right. Well, when they go back to the house, there's paintings everywhere, these famous paintings that are going to be worth millions in like 100 years' time. And Van Gogh just doesn't care anything about them, right? I think this is a bit later, but he wants to illustrate what the Crephaeus looks like, so he just like
takes some white paint and paints over one, and the doctor's like, "Oh no!"
And he just has like a cup of coffee sitting on one of them, and just has them placed haphazardly all over the place. So even I was kind of like, I mean, I'm not even into painting or whatever, but I was like, oh, like every time he just like throw a painting across the room or whatever.
When Amy accidentally puts a hole in one, I was like, oh. I think kind of that was the point, but...
Yeah, no, and later on, might as well just mention it now, it's the next morning when Van Gogh wakes up and he sees Amy's brought like all his sunflowers into his garden or whatever, and she's like, just thought you might want to paint these, and he's like, nah, actually, I think these things are kind of gross.
Yeah, he's kind of like, I kind of hate sunflowers. They're boring and tacky, and then they just sunflowers. Amy's like, oh, I really like sunflowers.
Yeah, apparently Amy is a huge fan of Van Gogh, which is a little weird. You wouldn't think.
I think that's why they went to the museum.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that would be the case, but you never know. You never know what weird crap people are into. And this isn't even that weird, but like, yeah.
Yeah, this is pretty mainstream. If we're talking on the scale from mainstream to hipster, Amy is just a mainstream
person.
I was trying to think of some like alliteration, something with M, but the only word I could come up with was Monday.
Man.
Oh, it's Monday. Oh. Anyway, the Crephaeus attacks, and the doctor's like, this is kind of weird. It's invisible. And Vincent's like, yeah, but I can see, can't you? And he's like, nope.
I actually like the way it attacks, and this is one of the few things I actually like about the Crephaeus, is like they're just discussing it, and all of a sudden you see just this tail come on screen from off screen, and just like knock the Doctor 10 feet back. After this, the Crephaeus gets a lot more lame.
Well, there's all these things flying all over the place, really.
Yeah.
The Doctor tries to hit it with a stick, but he's facing completely the wrong way.
Once you find out, and I actually guessed this in the scene where the Doctor is like pursuing the Crephaeus and then starts getting chased by it, but once you find out that it's blind, a lot of this it's put into perspective.
Right. Well, so they kind of they try to talk with Vincent about what it was, and that's when he paints over the old painting to paint a picture of the Crephaeus, and the Doctor's like, I'm just gonna go for a bit. I'll be back later. Don't go anywhere, Amy. Don't get into any trouble. I'll be right back. See you guys later.
So he runs back to the TARDIS, and this is where he's sort of pursued by the Crephaeus, but eventually he loses it. And this is where I guessed that it was blind.
Yeah,
it's
I didn't
a little
guess.
obvious, I think, because it's running into stuff, knocking things over, and then like they're in this just basically straight alleyway, and the Doctor just loses it there. I was like, all right, how does that work? I was like, maybe it's blind.
I don't know if the Doctor necessarily even knew that he was being chased by the Crephaeus.
I think he did.
I don't know, it's unclear, especially when he pulls out the device and he's like, yes, there's a good picture of it, and then it like roars and it's like, oh wait, that's not a picture, that's the actual Crephaeus.
Yeah, I mean, I think like after that he knows.
Right.
And like the bulk of that chase is after that. But
that's after he leaves the TARDIS though.
Oh yeah, well, whatever. Sometime during this, he goes into the, you're right, it is after he leaves the TARDIS, because he goes into the TARDIS and he looks up the Crephaeus.
Well, he tries to use the picture that Van Gogh painted, and he's like, damn, impressionists never accurate pictures. Because it thinks it's like, I think it thinks it's like a dog or something.
Yeah.
And the Doctor's like, no. So he takes it outside and he sees the Crephaeus in the mirror. I think it's kind of indicated that the Crephaeus can be seen in reflections. Or
just like, because they see it through a window later on, so just like if there's some,
Amy doesn't see it,
distorted somehow, whatever.
Amy and the Doctor don't see it.
Oh, really?
That's why Van Gogh has to tell him what window to go to, and the Doctor's like, oh, okay. And that's why Van Gogh has to tell Amy that it moved to the other window, because Amy can't see it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, at that point I was so tuned out that I just didn't care what was happening.
The Doctor comes back and he's like, yeah, so guys, it's a Crephaeus. And they're like, it's a what? Like, it's a Crephaeus.
It's like, and once it's actually like, you get kind of a picture of what it looks like, and it looks bad.
This is purely CG, I think.
Yeah.
When it first shows up and it's purely invisible, I thought it was like, are we doing the Vizians again? Are we doing the Spiridons again? Is that what's happening here?
But like, there's a way in which like the way it moves and stuff is.
Well, it's blind, so it's gonna be clumsy.
Yeah, I know that, but just like the way like all its muscles work and like how just its walk and stuff like that are just like, it's like uncanny almost.
You're a biologist now?
No, but I mean like it just because it looks kind of like a chicken dinosaur type thing, right? Like this other path that evolution might have taken.
Dinosaurs.
No, but like this other path, like if evolution zigged instead of zagged, we'd have Crephaeuses instead of chickens, right? But like just putting it against like what a chicken, like the impression of a chicken in your mind, for lack of a better word, something looks off about it. It's not a chicken, but it's a Crephaeus. But it just looks, and just on a technical level too, it kind of looks like Prisoner Zero. Like, well, it doesn't look like it, but like on a technical level, it reminded me of what I thought of Prisoner Zero, which is like, this isn't great.
I mean, I thought it was fine. I didn't have any big problems with it.
And they keep it hidden a lot of the time, I think because of budgetary reasons.
Might be why it's invisible.
But hey, I just thought, even in concept, it's kind of lame, like this giant chicken thing. I wasn't on board.
I mean, they're like hunters, though, the Doctor says. They like come to a planet, they hunt, and then they leave. And sometimes like a Crephaeus will get left behind, and then they eventually just starve or they come back for it. And that's what the doctor says later on when he figures out this one is, when he figures out this one is blind, he's like, well, he realizes that's why this one was left behind is because this one was blind, and that's why it was left behind. Yeah, like, that's not a feature of the species.
Yeah, no, but I mean, there's also like all this other stuff about like what and who can see things. Like there's all this dialogue about how Van Gogh like see, and I'm going to talk about this later and how this episode relates to photography, but we'll get into that. But it's interesting, like with the Crephaeus, you know, this blind thing going up against this artist who sees things in a different way than most people. And there's a scene about that, right, where they're all looking up at the stars and I think there's more to investigate here. There's more to think about here. I didn't think too much about it because, again, I don't think the episode's that great, but it's interesting.
Well, so the doctor talks to Van Gogh, and he's in one of his moods. He tells them to leave, so the doctor's like, well, we're leaving.
Yeah, he's like writhing around in his bed, and I didn't think the act, like, from here on out, I don't know who plays Van Gogh, but I didn't think he did a good job.
I think he did a fantastic job. Knowing someone with mental illness, he did a fantastic job, just straight up.
Yeah, but just the melodrama of it, and look, normally I'm totally on board with melodrama. Normally I enjoy melodrama. But,
so why is this different then?
I don't know. It hit me the wrong way, you know?
It hit you the wrong way. It didn't rub you the wrong way.
Yeah, because it did. It hit me the wrong way. It was like it hit me like a ton of bricks.
Like, is there a right way to get hit with a ton of bricks?
Because he's writhing around in bed, and, you know, it's almost overly melodramatic. The only real scene that I would say he did well in is the scene at the end where he's looking at all the paintings in the future, and there's a lot more that ruins that scene for me than that. So
I think he did a great job, honestly. So,
but he snaps out of it in like 5 seconds, and he's like, "All right, let's go out to the countryside."
Minutes, but again, accurate portrayal of mental illness.
Well, I mean, what is he? He has like bipolar disorder or something.
Yeah, which is pretty sure is characterized by like pretty rapidly shifting highs and lows. So,
yeah.
They go.
Isn't this technically like called manic depressive something or the other? I don't know the term, but
they might have like changed the name.
Yeah,
they might have changed the name in the DSM-5. The DSM is the manual that psychologists use to like diagnose mental illnesses.
What does it stand for?
I don't actually remember now. I knew 2 months ago.
Something manual 5?
I think so. Yeah, the DSM
Diagnostic 5 something manual 5 probably.
Just came out recently. It's like fairly recent. So. I think they did change it to manic depressive. I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I've heard that term before. I don't even know if it's the same thing as bipolar disorder. I just wanted to put it out there.
We'll throw it in the show notes.
Yeah.
They go to the church.
Yeah. And they convince Van Gogh finally to go there.
Well, because he's like, well, I'm ready to go now. And they're like, what? And he's like, we're going to the church. And they're like, oh, okay. And they pass by the like funeral procession for Roseanne, who died like yesterday. So they got this together rather quickly. Kind of almost feel like the mom was just waiting for her daughter to die, because really this was put together really quickly.
Yeah, but this is one of those allowances you have to make where it's like, all right, it's a TV show and they want to show this thing. And they have like a specific time frame to do it in, so here it is.
I guess. So they go to the church and Van Gogh is painting, and the doctor's talking about watching all these other painters paint, like Michelangelo and Picasso. Van Gogh's just like, I don't really care.
He's just like, what are you talking about, doctor? What they could have done is have like his depressive state last like a week and then have him come to, and then this funeral procession is like a week later.
If they wanted. But he said they could only stay for one night, so...
So yeah, they're at the church.
And then he says, "Oh, look, there it is, the Crephaeus." And the doctor's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go in there, and you guys stay here." The doctor's kind of overconfident because he's like, "I got a sonic screwdriver, and the sonic never fails." And I was like, "That's not true because I can't do wood." And he goes in to kind of, I guess, confront the Crephaeus or kind of fight it, but also not really fight it.
Find out what it's doing. Find out why it's terrorizing the town.
He gets thrown around a bit. Amy's like, well, we got to go after him. And Vincent's like, yeah, I guess so. So they go in and they get thrown around a bit. And this is when the doctor figures out that it's blind because it stops moving when they stop talking.
There's kind of a jump scare moment here, actually, where the doctor and Amy are sort of hidden in the, I don't know what, just like not a crawl space, but just a tight space. And Crephaeus just bursts through the wall. Shining style, I guess. No, not really.
Here's Crephaeus.
Are all Crephaeuses named Crephaeus?
Yes. And the doctor tries to talk with it, but it just kind of wants to attack, and the doctor's kind of weirded out by this. But he finds out that it's blind, and it's kind of just lashing out. And anyway, Vincent accidentally stabs it with his painter's easel.
Yeah.
And then it dies, and then Vincent's like, I didn't mean to kill it. I was just trying to scare it off.
Yeah, and
he was just blind
again,
and finding his way.
Another moment where the actor isn't great. And I guess Vincent doesn't really care about the Crephaeus, right? He's just like, oh, didn't mean to kill it, but oh well. But still.
We see Matt Smith awkwardly pretend to be rubbing the Crephaeus because it's invisible.
I mean, that's always the thing where, like, if something's CGI'd in and it's not, like, mocapped or, like, someone's having a conversation with someone who's not even in the scene.
Except this isn't even just not in the scene, it's just invisible, so you don't even get anything CG'd in. It's just Matt Smith literally just rubbing the air.
Yep.
Anyway, I guess they just leave the Crephaeus body there because they just leave.
No one can see it. It's fine.
It's in this abandoned church, mind, right? So I guess they go outside and they kind of lie down on the grass. And Vincent,
in the mud.
Vincent talks about how he sees everything differently.
Yeah, and I mean, he's the only one who can see the Crephaeus, right? Like this, He's this artist painting this thing that nobody else can see. And that's why, like, and that's, the curator says at the end too, right? Like, he saw the world in a way that nobody else did, and that's why his paintings survived, and eventually people recognized that he was great, that his paintings were, awesome or whatever. Or that he's not only the greatest artist of all time, but truly one of the greatest human beings ever to live, or whatever the speech is.
Well, so he talks about how Van Gogh, that is, talks about how the sky's not black at night, it's deep blue with different shades of blue, and the stars are like bright shining specks, and we see this CG scene, which I really thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, this was actually really awesome, the way the sky turns into like a Van Gogh painting.
Right. And so they go back and they're like, we're going to leave, and then Van Gogh basically tells Amy that if they stay, they'd have lots and lots of sex, because he's like, if you stay, we'll have children by the dozen. And Amy's just like, whoa.
There are also all throughout this, all these jokes about, both of them being redheads and stuff.
Yeah. And having very red-headed children.
Yeah.
The doctor and Amy are going to leave, and the doctor's like, hey, I got something to show you. So he takes him to the TARDIS, and he's surprised that it's bigger on the inside, but he doesn't actually say it.
He doesn't actually, and this is also something I want to talk about, Van Gogh doesn't actually show much surprise at, like, the TARDIS, or even just the concept of time traveling. He sort of just accepts it.
Well, because they're running out of time.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. But this is also something I want to talk about after we finish, which we're almost done with the episode. Summarizing it, that is.
They go to the future. The doctor takes him to the museum, shows him all his paintings hanging in the museum, and he's like, wow. He's like, this is a museum of the most famous paintings in the world. And Van Gogh is like, wow, wicked. Let's go see what they are. And there's just this whole wing dedicated to all his paintings.
Yep, so they go into this wing, and Van Gogh starts having, an emotional episode where he's seeing all of his... he's seeing himself be recognized as one of the greatest painters of all time, and he's hearing the curator talk about him, and the curator has this whole speech. And I really like this scene because of the emotion like this guy shows. I thought it was really well done. Even the speech I thought was well written and stuff like that, and drives home this point or whatever. Like, the curator is really passionate about Van Gogh and like is emotionally invested in it. but there's a vocal song playing, and I can't look past that.
Why not?
I just hate vocal music, like in soundtracks and kind of in general, but
I hate the music, not the scene, man.
But it's part of the scene. Like, I can't look past how much it brings the scene down. I just can't.
I just ignored it because I thought the song kind of sucked, just like from a musical standpoint. So I just ignored it.
So you thought the song was bad too?
But I didn't think it brought the scene down.
I did. Like,
well, that's something we'll just have to disagree on.
And I didn't even think, like, as a standalone song, like, not something I would listen to, but not also something that I would say, oh yeah, that's freaking terrible or whatever.
Well, it is.
But like, I just dislike when movies or TV shows use vocal songs as part of the soundtrack.
I guess. Fortunate son in every movie about Vietnam. They take Van Gogh home, and they come back to the museum for the third time. And they're like, I imagine this curator's like, why the hell do these people keep coming back?
They want to see what's changed now that Van Gogh knows he's going to be super famous.
Yeah, because they drop him off, and he's like, I'm going to go paint with renewed vigor. You're the first doctor who's actually helped. And they go back to the museum, and there's nothing.
And, everything's pretty much the same. And he's still committed suicide. I think that's the main thing that they wanted to find out is, did he still commit suicide at 37? Mm-hmm. Which he did.
But there is one change, is that the painting of the sunflowers now says for Amy on the pot.
This is just speculation, but I think the curator actually sounds less passionate, because you hear the curator's sort of tour in the background, and this is just from one line, so this is just speculation.
Maybe the passion was his first day on the job, and now this is like 3 weeks in, and he's like, God, I made a bad decision.
I hate this. Hate Van Gogh. No. But yeah, that's how it ends.
With a cut to black.
Is there I didn't notice any cracks in time in this, but
no. There's no cracks in time.
Yeah. That's probably for the best, it's sort of a self-contained kind of story.
The whole point of the story is, well, there's two main points to this story. The first is that the doctor's being nice to Amy because Amy's forgotten Rory, and she doesn't know it. We completely skip past the scene where they're walking to the church, and Van Gogh's like, I can see the sadness in your eyes. And she's like, I'm not sad. And he's like, then why are you crying? Van Gogh's like, you've lost someone. And she's like, I haven't lost anyone. And he's like, well, why are you crying? And the doctor kind of makes a funny face at this. And then she kind of wipes away a tear. And she's like, didn't even know I was crying.
Yeah. So the feeling of loss or whatever is still there. I guess she just doesn't remember Rory himself.
Yeah. The other main point of this episode is to get this message about mental illness and mental health out there to the masses. A lot of people, or at least what I read, was that this episode was well received, at least critically, because it shows that Doctor Who, unlike other science fiction programs, which whatever science fiction is, let's not get into that. Other science fiction programs, Doctor Who has a heart and can do these emotional episodes. I feel like you're not going to see Battlestar Galactica doing an episode like this, I guess was the point of that review.
Well, this also all goes back to Doctor Who's optimism in general. Mm-hmm. If you look at, I think, a lot of other science fiction shows, and just really science fiction in general, the literature too, not much of it is optimistic. In fact, most of it, I'd say, is maybe except for the Golden Age or whatever, is pretty pessimistic, or at least cautionary of the dangers of whatever the danger in the story might be. Whether it's relying too much on technology or, it's usually that.
Well, so I want to talk about the Doctor being way overconfident in this story, which is something that they've kind of touched on with the 11th Doctor, but not a lot. And they kind of play it up in this episode because the Doctor tells Amy and Van Gogh to wait behind and kind of just does his own thing for the whole episode. He basically straight up says this. Well, he actually does straight up say the Sonic never fails when he runs into the church away from Amy and Vincent.
He's been like that for a couple weeks now.
Yeah, that's the thing. He seems to be getting more overconfident than...
I'm guessing he's going to get beat down a little bit.
Beat down to his level.
Kind of like the 10th Doctor was at the end of his run.
Yeah. Kind of unfair to the 10th Doctor, though. He lost literally everything in that final story. That kind of just ruined him.
I was about to say, with less payoff, like the 10th Doctor going through all this stuff, whereas the 11th Doctor is just kind of been swaggering around a little bit.
Yeah, he's been kind of being granted a free pass almost to do whatever the hell he wants. So,
including tell this guy that he's gonna be one of the most famous painters like in history. You know, this has always been the Doctor's thing, is like, don't get involved. Well, so he says, like, don't get involved. Can't, you know,
that's the hypocrisy of the Doctor,
right?
there.
The fewer people who know we're from the future or from a different time or a different planet, the better, and stuff like that.
Right. I mean, the whole thing about that was that it's showing how, you know, the point is kind of like, you're not just going to cure someone's suicidal tendencies by just being like, hey, you're great, or just being like, you're going to be great in the future, because
sure, yeah, that makes sense.
Like, suicide and mental illness as a whole is like a complex and tricky subject, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's like just more complex than just being like, hey, get over it, or like, hey, you're going to do great things, so like, be happy about the future. It's like the thing about the episode is that it's more complex than that. And I think the whole thing about the episode is like, we should just treat people with kindness and compassion, regardless of like who they are. Let's be compassionate and kind.
Like his, and you know, I didn't even think of that until now. Like his, his mental illness. Like, I don't know if it's depression, but like he wasn't suicidal because he never sold a single paint, or he was completely unsuccessful in his lifetime. But it was something more than that, right? And just showing him like his success wasn't enough to change
like
anything.
It's a more complex issue at hand, which is like typically why, you know, people who go to therapy or get treatment for mental illness aren't like just cured in like a week. It typically takes like work and effort and like a couple months, maybe even years sometimes, depending on the severity of the mental illness and what kind of mental illness you have.
Sure. But that kind of puts this episode in perspective a little better for me. Kind of makes me like it a little bit more, honestly. Not that it should, but it kind of does.
I mean, that's part of the reason why I like this episode. I mean, the other thing is that the reason why it's in like a show like Doctor Who's because they wanted to show these things about mental illness to a younger audience, because I think, weirdly enough, the radio this morning on the drive over here was talking about like mental illness, and the radio host was talking about it. He was talking with Michael Phelps about it because Michael Phelps had suicidal tendencies. He revealed on the radio, and he was like, yeah, there was like 4 days where I just didn't even get out of bed because I just wanted to die. And like,
swim it off. No, I'm just kidding.
The host makes this point, like, I think where the discussion on mental illness and mental health needs to change is like in the younger generation, like we need to show them like a better way to handle it and a better way to talk about it and more understanding. Like, and I think that's part of the reason why Doctor Who is like, we need to show this mental illness to a younger audience, because like that's where the biggest change is going to come, I think.
Sure, and I think that's already happening. I mean, this is kind of a digression, but I think it's somehow related, actually. This was a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago, actually. I was reading this etiquette. Well, this is just something I stumbled on. I don't like go searching out like etiquette information online, but I was reading this article or this blog post on this blog about etiquette, about why it's not appropriate to say my bad, or not my bad. It's not appropriate to say no problem as a response to thank you. You should say you're welcome. And a lot of this thing was posted in like 2011 or something. The discussion's still going on. I'll see if I can find it again and put it in the show notes. But a lot of the discussion in the comments, which is, you know, went on for like 7 years basically, is like, it's a generational thing, right? When people, older generations or just older people in general, I guess, or no, older generations are they often feel more entitled. So when they do something for someone, they don't feel as if they're putting someone like out of their way or whatever. And this is just what I gleaned from the comments, right? I'm not putting this out there as my own belief. But so the response, in like when younger generations say like no problem, that you're reassuring the person that it wasn't like a problem, like them asking you for help wasn't putting you out of your way, like you would have done it. And that's supposed to make them feel good. And, you know, people were saying like older generations feel more entitled and they don't have that. So I don't know. I just feel like things are changing. People are more aware of like that other people exist.
That other people are actually other people and not just like
accessories to their own life.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, there are other ways in which that's true too. I just wanted to bring up this blog post. But yeah, there's another thing I want to talk about in this episode, which is how this episode it conflates painting and photography in like this weird way. And I've been reading a little bit about this recently, and also as it's related to literary theory, because that's kind of all I read about. But you look at like, and this is also related to like individualism in art and like the concept of art as self-expression. But you look at like photography. I mean, you're done with what you want to talk about, right? All right. You look at like photography is like in the etymological sense, like photo and then graph, like light writing, right? The writing of light. And this episode frames painting as almost that, right? They're looking at the stars, and Van Gogh's is like, it's not just all black. It's like some parts are lighter, and there's all these points of different lights and colors and stuff like that. In a photographical sense, in the sense of the writing of light. But I don't know, and I don't know too much about photography or painting, but I think painting is actually a lot more than that. And you think of like, and a big problem I actually have with this episode is the way it promotes like art as self-expression, which I can go into this for hours and hours, and I won't, but like, I don't think that's even really possible, but I think the belief that art can be self-expression is actually really dangerous on a societal level. But you look at even the term like snapshot, right, for picture, for photograph, whatever, and you look at like, and this is the thing, photography it's kind of a new art form, right? Last 150, maybe 150 years, yeah. And this is really where all this is sort of starting this artistic individualism. And you look at like snapshot, right? You look at that word and how people might take pictures and say like, yeah, this picture is my self-expression from this point, and this picture I took 3 years later is self-expression from this point. These moments like captured. I don't know really how to explain this, but these moments completely frozen in time, like standout type things where the story doesn't continue, right? Like it's things get frozen in time with photography. And I've been reading a lot of Walter Benjamin lately. Walter Benjamin, if you don't know, was this theorist, I guess. He was German from the beginning of the 20th century. And he actually also committed suicide because he was Jewish and he was fleeing the Nazis and stuff, and complications with getting into like France and Spain, I believe, actually resulted in him eventually just killing himself because he's like, I'm never going to make it out of here. Might as well just, go out on my own terms, I think was his mentality. But he writes a lot about this kind of thing. And like, one of the things I've been reading about lately also, both from Benjamin and this other guy named Karl Kraus, who's also sort of in the same like vein as Benjamin, is this idea of the not ritual, the festival as like this involuntary memory, like almost what I was talking about for like a photograph, like these moments standing out in time. But you think of festivals, right? Like a yearly thing, even Christmas, and that's a bad example because it just is. We don't need to get into why, but like you think of like these days that recur or whatever, whether it's every year or every, however much it occurs. And like these moments are moments that like stand out of time, yet they're also connected as if no time has passed between them. So like on each day you're like, all right, so you involuntarily remember and connect that day to all the previous occurrences of it. And that goes like throughout time, like from whenever that ritual or festival started and continues into the future. But the thing about using photography as a means of self-expression is it sort of freezes that. It says, here's me at this point in time, and then here's me at this other point in time, frozen in this moment, not going between moment to moment, and I don't even really know how that works. It seems almost paradoxical. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that. And I don't think it's necessarily a great thing that's in the episode, the way it conflates even painting with that. And I think painting is is something that can't, I don't know. I feel like painting, unlike photography, doesn't freeze the moment as much and allows like a continuum of thought and disallows self-expression a lot more than this episode says it does. But that's just my rant.
Yeah, I got nothing to say on it. And I have nothing else to say actually at all.
Yeah, that's it from me.
If you would like to email us, you can find us at thedoctor@decorativevegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on Vincent van Gogh. You can find us, on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and Google Play at Trust Your Doctor. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast and follow us on Twitter. And next time we're watching The Lodger. But until then, the end.